Hey folks, it's Rob coming to you from Game Over Video Games in Austin, Texas, here for Spankwagon.net. I don't have anybody else to go .net, unfortunately. But what I do have here is probably one of the most prolific comedic songwriters I've ever seen, and now thankfully have the honor to talk to. He's known as Brent Black, but he goes by the name Brentalfloss. How you doing, man?
Good, how are you?
I'm awake. That's about all I can give you right now. So, how's Austin been so far?
Great. I mean, you know, I'm from Texas, so it feels like home.
Right.
Austin's a little bit weirder than Dallas, where I'm from, but I guess that's the idea.
Right.
But yeah, it's gone well. You know, I'm basically just kind of like mostly thinking about the show coming up. Haven't really done a whole lot of nightlife, although I did drive by a bar called the Brixton, I think that's what it's called. On one of the two sides of 6th Street, but it had like a mural on the wall with nothing but like Shy Guys, all of them with masks of different video game characters. So like a Shy Guy holding up a Mega Man mask and so forth. It was pretty.
I gotta find that now.
Yeah.
I'm very, very interested.
It's over on I don't know the geography very well, but there's like they told me there was Dirty 6th and then the other side of 6th. And it was the other side of 6th, but now I don't remember which one was dirty. So the point is, it is in the 6th Street area, but I'm not sure which side it is on.
I'll have to go check that out. I'm very interested now. So, you've got a new CD coming out, and I have to say, you've been all over the place with promotion for this.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do research, and I was like, I can't read and listen to all these interviews. There's been so many. So, how you had a CD prior to this? One of the CD had lyrics. The new one is Bits of Me. So, what have you learned from a production perspective, and maybe even songwriting, from what is a CD versus Bits of Me? Well,
the thing is, I don't know that I learned a whole lot as far as songwriting, because so much of what of the CD had lyrics was pre-existing material that it was sort of like a compilation, whereas Bits of Me has a little bit of new stuff. But what I did learn is that if you do something on an album, it's sort of forever. The way they say film is forever.
Right.
Like any little comment, any little slight inconsistency or funny little thing that you thought was cute in the studio becomes the legacy. You know?
Right.
And forever, down to like the order of the tracks. If you have a certain track after another, then when the first one ends, if anybody ever hears the first one out of context, at the end of it, they'll subconsciously expect the next one.
Right.
So every little choice you make, if a significant number of people are going to listen to your album, really contributes to a permanence. And so we were just kind of trying to take that into account.
Right.
Still make it feel spontaneous. Still have, you know, whimsical, what a manly word that is, choices in it. But just trying to think more in terms of quality control, and that if something on the day of print makes us cringe a little bit, it'll make us cringe a lot. And we'll end up just skipping that track for the rest of our lives. So we're trying to make sort of a very solid.
Right. Well, and kind of to that point, something you'd mentioned on another interview was on Bits of Me, there was, I think you put it, less filler tracks.
Yes.
So, like before with, and now I'm going to take guess here, like the filler tracks you talked about on What If was like the Cartman track and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what made you think about skipping, you know, maybe like those skit tracks just going?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's not so much, I mean, there are tracks on the first CD that it's not so much that they're bad or invalid, it's that there's no replay value to them. There's no intricacy to them, they're just kind of what they are. And the Cartman thing was just me going, hey, we should really do something with Cartman, because that's a voice I can do.
Right. So that was you doing it?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. All right.
Yeah, we just took up, just like they do on the show, we took up the pitch digitally, like maybe a whole step or a half step, just slightly to make it higher. But yeah, I do a lot of voices, and that's one of them. But yeah, it was basically just showing off my Cartman.
Right.
And we sneakily thanked Matt Stone and Trey Parker, just because we thought that would maybe spark some interest,
Right.
make people think, oh, maybe they got their permission. We totally didn't. But to answer your question about, crap.
Or
Hit me
the
one more
less filler
time.
tracks was a
Yeah.
conscious decision for it.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I know that after, I listened to the original CD over and over again.
Right.
In the quality control phase, then left it alone for a while, and then every now and then I'll go to the gym and I'll just listen to the whole thing through. But when I say that, what I mean is the whole thing through minus the tracks that I'm just kind of over.
Right.
Like Paperboy, for instance, was great, but I feel like keeping the original Konami Code version kind of put a big pause in the comedy. And so it's kind of like, if you really like jazz fusion rock stuff,
Right.
then you had a great time through the entire track. But a lot of people were like, it's just a chore to listen to that entire 4-minute breakdown just to get back to the lyrics at the other end.
Right.
And so it's just the attempt in general was to make it something that not only would we hope the audience wouldn't skip, but that literally me and Joe, my sound engineer, that we wouldn't skip.
Right. Okay. Because that was one thing I enjoyed the Paperboy track as a whole, but I can kind of see where some people might be like, get back to the funny,
Right,
get back to the
exactly.
funny.
Right.
So I can see that. So, now, one thing that I've always thought was interesting about you was, even though you do collaborate with other groups, you're pretty much doing this all on your own.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, I'm doing all that from the songwriting to the video to the promotion. What's it like being pretty much a one-man band?
It is great and awful.
Okay.
It's great because if things go right with the Brentalfloss brand, I get all the credit.
Right.
It sucks because if anything goes wrong, even if I'm actually not the reason, then I get the brunt. For instance,
Right.
our recent delays with the CD, the printing company that we go through doesn't really have a personality or a face, so
Right.
no one can get mad at that person. But because I'm Brentalfloss and it's my CD,
It's directed at you.
right?
Yeah.
So that it's like, what is it? Rising tides lift all boats, or whatever. I think
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing there.
Mhm.
But it's like, the tide falls and it rises,
Yeah.
and I'm that boat that just goes right with it. But also, one of the challenges is keeping the creative stuff flowing while dealing with the administrative side,
Right.
which is just like a bunch of emails answering, and I'm not always great about it,
Right.
but like trying to keep up with fan mail, which is not like an avalanche a day. It's just
Right.
that if you get a certain amount of little messages a day, little questions, little comments, little things like that, or inquiries about shows perhaps, if you neglect that for a few days, then suddenly you've gone from like 10 to maybe 50 or maybe
Yeah.
100, and it's like the amount of time it takes to deal with that can take away from the time that I would rather be spending working on a new lyric or just singing through one of the songs, or that kind of thing.
Right.
So because there's so many elements to the whole process, and because I'm pretty much doing all of them, the challenge is to never do too much of one thing in order to keep the entire creative process rolling.
You just pick up one, work on it, set it down. Go to the
Exactly.
next. So with that, explain to me your thought process when you have a song and you're like, I think this will make a great video. So take me through that. How does that work for you?
Well, there's always some kind of breaking point where I go from that might be cool to, okay, now I have to do this. With Castlevania, I had been thinking about doing some Castlevania tune. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do Beginning from 3 or Vampire Killer from 1.
Right.
But Bloody Tears seemed to be the most ubiquitous song, and it was in so many Castlevania games that came after it, which is a consideration. Like, do the kids who are 10 now, are they going to know this song in the same way that someone who's 30 or 40 does?
Right.
So, in terms of Castlevania, for instance, it was thinking Bloody Tears might be a good idea, and then watching the Angry Video Game Nerds video on Castlevania 2, and realizing, oh, the plot is Simon Belmont's putting these body parts back together. That's hilarious.
Right.
That was the breaking point on that one. Mega Man 3 Game Over, for instance, I was on a train back from my sound engineer's house, because he lives upstate,
Right.
and it was just basically me going, why is that Game Over music's so freaking happy. Why is he such a jerk? And at that point, it was like, this is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never just the music, or rather, it's not always the music. It's not always the concept. I'm doing a little Nemo with lyrics right now, where
Oh wow, okay.
yeah, and the concept is actually not as much lyrical or conceptual as it is musical. The concept is that we're gonna do a gospel version of it.
Really?
Yeah, so we got some, we rented out a church for a few hours. Yeah, it was Unitarian, so it's not that big of a surprise. We didn't have to shoo any nuns out or anything. But borrowed their choir robes and just kind of went for it. It's an Underbelly collaboration. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I do some videos with them from time to time. But in the case of Little Nemo, it was the fact that I loved that song, and then I realized that I could do it in a gospel style, and that was the hook. But it's like it has to pass. Any given song has to pass a test, which includes: do I actually think the song's really good? Like as far as being catchy, being something that'll stick in people's heads.
Right.
Can I bring it to life in a way that is good? Because I'm doing some animated projects soon, and sometimes, the difference between an animated with lyrics and with lyrics is, would this be so much better if it was animated, and or would it be so much worse than its potential if I did it live action?
Right.
So there's those considerations, but usually, like I said, if it's a good tune and I can come up with a decent lyrical concept, at that point it just is a matter of can I find something that actually excites me about it, be that the concept, the musical style, or just the song being just that good.
Okay. So now one thing you mentioned, and actually we've seen on What If, is you tend to collaborate with a ton of different artists. Like your for Video Games Rock 2, which you're here in town, I mean, you're going to be playing with 80% Cassandra Verdry,
Right.
Stuff like that. One thing I have noticed when I first started getting into VGM, and especially the community that surrounds it, there tends to be a high percentage of collaboration within.
Sure.
What is that?
Well, I think it's because the VGM community is a unique group of people with one thing in common.
Mm-hmm.
They all liked video game music so much
Right.
that instead of learning Stairway, instead of learning a solo from, some Poison song,
Right.
they learned video game music. They taught themselves, because they would have had to teach themselves. There's no sheet music.
Yeah.
So, in my case, I was the kid at the student union in college who, when the piano in the cafeteria was unoccupied, I'd sit down and play Mario. I'd sit down and play Zelda. And, invariably I'd be done, and one nerd in the back would be like, yeah! But the thing is that I unknowingly was sort of part of a small group of people. I thought I was one of the only people doing that, but it turns out there were quite a few, and those are the VGM people. So it's like, we have kind of a, I would say brotherhood, but there are some girls involved. We have kind of a kinship that goes beyond just being musicians, and it's like there really is a personality type, or at least we all have that love of the music in common, and that's such a specific thing that collaboration is just a means to further that and to keep exploring that together. Right. So it's kind of like, collecting something really obscure and then finding out, oh my gosh, these people do the same thing. Right. I'm not alone,
Yeah, that was really something I noticed at MagFest.
Oh yeah.
That was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Time I was there. So anybody you would really, really like to work with that you haven't yet?
Well, in the VGM scene, I guess this isn't fair. I have worked with Mega Ran, so I can't say him. Outside the VGM scene, the Angry Video Game Nerd, I'd love to work with. Ego Raptor, I'd love to work with. And I've talked with Ego Raptor about it. We just didn't find a project we wanted to do.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that at one point.
Yeah, and the thing is, it was not really no hard feelings or anything. It was more just that he and I couldn't think of a thing to do immediately. Right. And animation takes a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't just kind of on a whim kind of crank out an animated video. But I'd love to eventually do something with him. And then back to VGM, there's a lot of bands that I really like Power Glove. Mm-hmm. I really like the Proto Men. And as much as I gave the Proto Men crap in that one video, where I made
In
fun of
Act
them,
3, yeah.
yeah, it was all out of love.
And actually, what did you ever get a response or a reaction out of them
Oh,
for
yeah.
that? How did they take it?
They loved it,
Uh-huh.
but it was kind of in that kind of like, you got us, you know what I mean? Like they weren't. They were sort of a weird mix of like annoyed and honored, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Because the thing is, like, nobody likes to be made fun of, but that level of elaborate pastiche.
Yeah, that went really far. And when you started going on like about the lyric sheets, reading through it, I was like, he nailed it. That was good.
Thank you. And well, to me, the most fun part was just trying to make each song sound like a pre-existing Proto Men song. But yeah, it was really fun, and we bought costumes and all kinds of stuff, and it was just
silver.
Yes, it was a fun tribute to this band and their special kind of stuff,
Right.
Their special way of performing their kind of music, but also like I said, that's not a collaboration. That's just making fun of them.
Right.
And at some point, I would love to actually. I don't know what it would be, but just like maybe like a single or like one of my videos, maybe getting like Panther on there. I'd love to get the whole band, but how do you get them into the studio?
Yeah, no kidding.
But
how many do they have? Like 13 members or something?
It's like a menagerie of people, but especially when you like not just the ones that tour, but like the ones that also record. It's even more. But one day that's sort of like a medium to long term goal.
Okay. What does it do? When you're writing your songs about these games we've all grown up with and love, do you think the draw is it purely the comedy, or is it people just like, oh man, Brent wrote a song about one of my favorite games?
Well, I think it's what's great about it is that there are infinite doors in. There are infinite ways into this thing. If somebody didn't play the game, then what I have to offer for them is a great tune usually.
Right.
And I don't mean that. By that I don't mean like a great performance. I mean like I usually pick really catchy tunes that are just good no matter what. Add on to that, sometimes there's comedy that exists independently of the game, and so that's the second level. And the third level is honestly remembering the specifics of the game and having nostalgia in your own heart.
Right.
Because that's what, like the greatest thing I can do with lyric series is sort of like pour into somebody's heart like a liquid and like take the shape of that void that they have in there in the shape of Castlevania 2 or Kirby or whatever. And it's doesn't happen every time because not everyone has played every game that I pastiche.
Yeah.
So basically, the ultimate reaction is when people have a nostalgic reaction, they laugh because it's funny, and they love the tunes. But any combination of that, a little bit less this, a little bit more that, is still, I think a valid way in.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to do is do something very specific. One thing, just to get a little pretentious on you, one thing, artistically that I believe is that if you try to sort of please everybody and do a lot of things, you will fail and nobody will actually be able to read themselves into what you're doing. But if you do one really specific thing, somehow everyone can read their own thing into that.
Right.
And see themselves in some way in it. And I don't always succeed at that, but that's usually the goal, is to try to do something really specific, kind of present a clear marble, and people will read into it what they will, whether that's nostalgia, whether that's the implications on their own life, or what have you.
Well, or as far as like reading yourself into it, like Paperboy. Because I played that game a lot in the arcade, and when you're talking about, the baby walking in the street, stuff like that, I'm like, I totally know this. That's what I loved about that song. Now, you had mentioned that you have written and directed plays. How is that versus being a performer? Because you in another interview you had mentioned you had been out of that performing mind space for a while, and then when you got back into it, when you started doing your shows, it was almost like getting on a bike.
Yeah.
Learning it again.
Yeah, it really was. The question is like about the differences between being in the director-writer chair and being a performer. Well, I have to say, the funny thing about Brentalfloss is that at everything besides the live shows, I'm still doing all the parts. I just include performing. The weirdest part of that is that I have to kind of forget that I'm the writer when I'm performing it, and then I have to forget that I'm the talent when I'm editing it. Because after a while, you just realize you're looking at your own face, and you're like, oh, is that a splotch? And oh, is that a wrinkle? You gotta just like look at it. And I've gotten pretty good at doing this just because I've done like, I don't know, like 200 videos or something. But after a while, you know, you sometimes start to just kind of like overanalyze because it's you. And the trick is to treat it like it's just the talent on this video. And sometimes I will realize that I, the performer, kind of screwed me, the editor, by not remembering to get a certain shot a certain way or kind of hamstringing the editing process. And so sometimes that makes it easier to go, that jerk, you know, that bald douchebag. But yeah, I mean, as a live show performer, though, to answer your question, it is a lot different because I'm just up there trying to be as much of an air tunnel as I can. What I mean by that is, or like a meat grinder. If you're up on stage and doing the kind of show I do, and things go into your head and stop, then you get blocked up. There's too much going on, and you just kind of like explode. I try to like kind of constantly have, I mean, in one ear, not the other usually means that you're not listening, but what I mean is that it's like information in, information out. If somebody does something out in the audience, I don't ignore it like I'm giving some, you know, like stuffy speech. Somebody says something, they've thrown a ball up on stage, and my job is to, you know, hit a home run every time.
Yeah, like I remember last year somebody had asked if you were going to, or if you ran for president, who would you choose? And he said Koji Kondo. Which I thought was funny.
Well, and the thing is, the trick is just to basically, it's just like acting or improv. It's just about listening and responding based on what you heard and based on you, and not thinking too hard about it. It's a very hard mind space to get into.
So, if you were given the opportunity within this community, would you direct a video for somebody else within VGM, maybe?
It would have to be the situation where I had a decent team of people with me. Because the thing is, I know how to make me look decent. Making somebody else look good and making their vision come to life is not really the business I'm in. And it's not to say that I couldn't do it. It is to say that I would need, basically, you know, to be really in charge. And to, not so I could be a jerk about it, just so that it's kind of like, you know, if a director at some point is really getting in messy collaboration with an artist, sometimes if the artist feels like they have way too, rather if the artist actually has way too much say on the set, nothing gets done because the director's going, look, this is the concept. I know you're your own band, but this is kind of my video. That's the challenge of directing a video with a band, especially if they have a very specific idea of what they're doing. So the answer is yes, but I'd have to really like them, and we'd have to have a plan beforehand.
So one thing that I've always thought was very interesting for you was, and especially because you're doing all these parts, promotion. I mean, how many interviews have you done ever since the pre-orders for Bits of Me?
I think this will be something like 25 or 30, somewhere in there.
So how do you tackle that, especially with the whole YouTube thing, you know, responding to the community? How do you tackle that?
You know, it's just a good combination of being honest and entertaining. If you're ever 100% honest, that's not going to work, because it's the same way that like okay, I hope what I'm about to say does not come off douchey, but it is true. Sometimes, especially since so much of my audience is young, and so many of the ones that ask the dumb questions, which there are, there are stupid questions, are either young or a little bit uninformed, or just weren't thinking and didn't do their research. They just thought asking me is better than Google, which sometimes it's not. But the point there is that if a parent always told their child, hey, I really resent the fact that you are a needy little jerk, and I have to wipe your diaper, and I have to carry you everywhere, and I'd really like to just have a drink and relax, but I can't. That's completely honest, but doesn't help the kid.
Right.
So it's like, I have to be honest so that I'm not lying, but only to the point where it's helpful, and then entertaining. Now this all, what I've just said, applies to positive or neutral comments or interactions.
Right.
The tough thing to tackle is trolls or people with honest, dissent.
Right.
Because I'm never afraid to tell somebody they're right if they honestly are, because it's scarier to pretend someone's not right when everyone can see that they are.
Right.
So if I do a video and I messed up a certain thing, there's no use in arguing it.
Yeah.
It's better to go, whoops, well, you're right, I did, and kind of like do the whole sort of dispel the pH of the trolliness, back to a neutral level. But it's very strange the way people see me, because it's everything from a meal ticket, in the case of people that'll be like, hey, I don't know you, but will you plug my thing? All the way over to a father figure where people will be like I've had, emails and letters from kids who either don't have a father figure or don't have a present one or whatever, and they'll ask me advice about their lives, and it's very strange.
Wow.
And on the one hand, I don't want to encourage that because I need time to be doing things that I'm doing when I'm not giving advice to children. But on the other hand, it's very satisfying sometimes that somebody would ask me and that I get to think about it and go, well, here's what I think.
Okay.
And everything in between. So, it's a tough balance knowing that I'm trying to project a real person within, but also not to the point where it's negative or could, be hurtful or unhelpful.
Okay. Now, you've described yourself as an internet celebrity, which that's pretty much what it is, because YouTube has been a great platform for that. But you've also said that you're trying to get a foothold in the theater, especially in New York. Now everybody's always talking about new media, new media, new media. I found that very interesting that you had talked about potentially using YouTube to maybe get I think you said a backdoor entry into the theater scene in New York. And another example of that, Nathan Barnett, he does all his videos, but he was trying to do stuff for Adult Swim.
Right.
I found that very interesting, kind of doing it the reverse way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that, well, one, what do you think your chances are, well, not only for yourself, but for anybody else who might try that same method? And two, in the future, with us all being connected, is there going to be a need for that anymore?
What, theater?
Well, for old media, putting it that way.
Okay, so 2 questions here. 3 actually. What are my chances? Well, let me explain what I am trying to do. I'm not currently trying in a everyday kind of way to break into the theater, but I do have a new concept for a channel that will hopefully come out later this year.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, I was never in the video game convention circuit. I was never anybody that anybody wanted to see in the video game circuit, video game conventions, concerts, but through the internet, you could say I snuck in by making a brand that people like, and if they like it and they're in that niche and that genre and they're into that, then suddenly I'm someone who could perform these things, right? In the same way, if I make a channel that is like a parody of classic Broadway, classic show tunes, classic movie musicals, but it's still the same kind of biting satire that I do in Brentalfloss, then if enough people come into that, become fans of that, it's almost like could be a very quick way to establish a name for myself, and then hopefully eventually it's like if you're already known in a community and you're already going to that party, then that's when you meet the guy that can go, hey, do you have any serious projects? And if it doesn't work out, it's going to be okay, because the internet is still a great place to do stuff. That said, are we going to have a need for old media? I don't consider the stage media, but I think we're still going to have a need for live performance because you can't simulate it.
Right.
You cannot. They tried doing live concerts on AOL years ago. They've since learned. I mean, you know, Bill Maher did a live stand-up show on Yahoo
Right.
that you could then watch after the fact. And you know, it wasn't bad. Stand-up is one thing, but like a live music show or a live play,
Right.
there's something about the liveness, the fact that anything could go wrong, the fact that you're watching it played out in front of you, that I just, until we have surround 3D, even then it's still going to flicker like those Tupac holographs.
Yeah.
Or holograms, whatever. Point being that theater, there's something about it that will never quite, in my opinion, be overtaken by anything digital, anything that you can hold in your hand and give to somebody else.
Right.
It's just a live, special, once in a lifetime, literally thing, because every performance is its own special version of the show that will never quite happen that way again. As for TV, you know, TV, radio, etc., I think it's less that we're going to lose old media and more that we're going to just see a blurring of the lines. Right now, I have Netflix. Now, Netflix is on my computer, it's on my phone, it's on my TV through the Wii.
Right.
So, what is it? It's just shows. It's not really TV shows because there's also movies.
Right.
So it's not so much like all these media are coming together, and the only distinction really is genre and length.
Right.
There's the 20-minute form, there's the 40-minute form, there's the 90-minute form, and so on. So I think that people will probably always want audio in their cars because watching a movie in your car is not a good idea until that Google car that drives itself, you know.
And I think it's illegal in most places, actually.
Which part? Oh, watching movies? Yeah, I would think. Probably not a good idea to do that. But you know, I think that, so music is going to stay important in that way. And of course it just is in general. But yeah, I think that the visual media is just slowly melding together. And I hope that it eventually becomes a little bit more like the internet model where it's more on demand. Once a episode of a show is released, it's out there and you can watch it immediately and whenever you want. And whether the business model is ad supported or pay per episode, it's much more freedom and merit based.
Right. There's been songs I've been wondering about, especially mostly off of What Of the CD. Mushroom Kingdom. What brought on that idea? And I have to say that for a parody cover, that was actually one of my favorites off that one.
Thanks.
What brought that about?
So basically, I don't know when exactly it was, but I heard, I think like at the grocery store or on the radio or something, I heard the original Sister Christian, whose chorus is Motorin', and I just kind of fell in love with that song. And then I immediately after that, this was summer 2009, I had a 2-week catering gig that turned out to be 14-hour days, 12 out of 14 days at the US Open in New York. And it was grueling, but I made a lot of money and I was pretty broke, so I needed it.
Right.
And basically that song that I just bought on my iPhone or iPod or whatever it was at the time became the soundtrack of my life. Every morning, right before I rolled up on the 7 train to the US Open grounds, I would crank that song in my ears in my little penguin suit, all dressed up every day in like a shirt that I'd worn 3 days in a row or whatever. Just rock out to that song. And eventually, when the song gets deep enough into my head, I end up wanting to do something with it in the video game realm.
Yeah.
Another example of this is a song I'm doing called Co-op Love this Sunday with the band. That's basically a mashup of a song by Joe Cocker called Space Captain, which is an amazing, kind of Woodstock era, drug-induced song. Very funky, very awesome. That with the idea of 2 people who are in love playing a co-op game, and the idea that playing River City Ransom together can be kind of a way to sort of express your relationship. So same idea, if a song gets stuck in my craw enough, then at some point I want to let it out and make it part of the art I'm already doing, and that was a great example of that. So that's how that song came about.
Okay, I really have to ask about this one, the Roommate song. You said it was kind of inspired by a previous roommate of yours, Travis. how much of that was actually based in real life
Well,
experiences? I mean, some of it had to be played up, obviously, but
it's like based, right? The
Right.
way that like a corn casserole is based on corn,
Right.
but it ends up being a lot of other stuff.
yeah.
So corn casserole, ugh, where'd that come from? So
Yeah, have you ate yet this morning?
I haven't actually. I just
That might be
rolled
part
out
of
of
it.
bed. Yeah, my brain's talking about. It's like reminding me of food. So Travis, basically, without embarrassing my friend Travis too much, what happened was he had a roommate that was actually not me.
Mm-hmm.
Before he was my roommate, he had a roommate who had a computer. Travis did not have a computer in the dorms. So Travis would sometimes just use the computer for whatever.
Right.
And I think one time perhaps he gave into a temptation to use it for things that were not altogether academic, and his roommate busted in on him. Suddenly there was this awkward moment where Travis was covering himself in a blanket, and awkwardness ensued. And like I think the next day or the day after that, the roommate moved out. And so I just thought about that one experience and I thought, what if that was an everyday thing? What if somebody had to deal with that kind of stuff every day? And so that's what the song was about. It was actually
Okay.
for a musical called Shades of Grey that I wrote in college.
Oh, okay.
It's one of the few pieces of that show that survives even now.
Right.
In the Brentalfloss stuff. But yeah, Travis was not an awful roommate. Very messy, which is represented in the comic. But what was great about Travis as a roommate had nothing to do with him being, you know, like a dirty bird. It was much more about being a good person and a good friend.
Right. So actually, since you mentioned it was a song from a play, will we ever see a Brent Black album?
You know, I don't know. Because at some point, I'm not sure what parts of me... Well, let me back up. There was technically a Brent Black EP last year called the Super Secret EP,
Yeah.
which was used to fundraise for the album.
Right.
And even though some of it was theater stuff, it was all non-Brentalfloss work.
Mm-hmm.
And that said, you know, one thing I've discovered with the Brentalfloss stuff is that my voice is kind of on a par and in a genre with a voice like Weird Al, where it's not bad. This, you know, you can carry a tune, but it's not a voice you necessarily want to hear doing anything serious.
Right.
And I go back and forth on whether I should, like, you know, do a serious album or do stuff that's a little bit more grown up or a little bit less comedy based. So, you know, there is a question of the instrument, but also, like, if I write a musical that is intended for other people to sing and we release a soundtrack, in a way, that's just a different way to do a Brent Black album. So, will you see something that I release in album form that is not Brentalfloss? Yes. What will it be? No idea yet.
No idea? Okay. So, I actually have some very specific questions came from my roommate, actually. So, in Brentalfloss the comic, which I've really enjoyed so far.
Thank you.
And so has he. There have been, in the short run, you guys have done 2 Star Trek Next Gen references.
Yes.
Or just full strips. How big of a Trek fan are you?
Am I? I wouldn't say huge. I am passingly familiar with the original series. I've watched all of the movies up through... I haven't watched all the Next Gen movies. I just hear that most of them are a waste of time. But I've watched all the Star Trek movies up through, I think... what was the first... The one where they crash. The Next Gen one where they crash into the planet.
Generations.
There you go. Okay, so that's the mashup one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So...
You should watch First Contact, by the way. That one's really good.
Yeah, I need to get around to that. I watched most of the Next Gen series.
Right.
A little bit of Deep Space Nine, but Deep Space Nine is just a different flavor of
Yeah.
thing. And takes some getting used to when you're getting into the first season, as you know, Next Gen did. But I would say I'm a fairly casual fan of it. But Dan, my co-writer, is a huge Trek fan.
Oh, okay.
So he loves, I'm not sure he loves the original series very much, but definitely Next Gen, definitely Deep Space Nine. I think he's even into Voyager and watched all of Enterprise. So
Wow.
yeah,
He suffered through Enterprise?
Yes, I didn't make it past the second episode.
What hobbies do you have outside of theater and video games and?
You know, I get asked this a lot. I think I'm the kind of person that, like, if I do anything halfway well, I somehow turn it into my job.
Right.
So if there's not a whole lot of hobbies that exist completely independent. I try to get to the gym, but that doesn't mean that I like sports. You know,
Right.
I like karaoke occasionally. I have a girlfriend, so she's quite a big hobby. We watch movies, and we like horror movies. She's one of the
Really?
few. Yes, I've never dated a girl that is so like game to watch a scary movie as she is. Now the trade-off is, she's a real trooper, but she'll try to spook me or scare me, like either during or after the movie.
Right.
Or she'll be so scared after the movie that, like, she won't want to, like, leave the house or whatever. But at least she'll watch them. So we like that. We do that a lot. It's fun. Lots of. You'd be surprised how often I'm the one, like, grabbing onto her, because I'm a big scaredy cat. There's that. There's politics is a huge hobby of mine.
Really?
And I guess what I mean is just being a politics junkie and a consumer of political news and culture. I'm just fascinated with how it works. The more I get into it, the less I feel like I have an actual political viewpoint, because I see so many different points of view. It's like the blessing is that I can understand multiple points of view. The curse is that it's really hard. It's kind of like if you were raised, like Catholic and Jewish,
Right.
It might be a little bit tougher to kind of choose one because they're mutually exclusive.
Right.
And in the same way, conservative, liberal are mutually exclusive. I can't simultaneously be hard left, hard right. Hard left, hard right. There we go. Getting the right hands there. But I love the way politics works, and it's almost like a sport to me, because I love watching somebody in a debate have a great, get attacked and then have a great counter swing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think boxing's dumb, but I think politics sometimes is the same exact thing, just with words,
Yeah, before other stuff kind of took me away from it, I was the same way. And what was funny when, during the 2008 debates, I seriously would watch them and sit there with a six-pack.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like...
In New York, I would go out and they would have the top floor of these Irish bars just completely set aside to watch the debates.
Really?
And it was like a football game, especially like Hillary, Barack, just the Democratic ones. Like, you would be up standing next to somebody who was a Hillary supporter. I, at the time, was a Barack supporter. And, it was like, you were watching, you're familiar with the Red River Shootout, basically the OU Texas game every year. You would think you were standing next to an OU fan and you were a Texas fan. It was so the way that you sort of clap for yours and boo the other.
Yeah.
It was intense. And while, to be fair, I think it's not necessarily a good thing that the media is trying to polarize the country in order to get them to keep watching, to be more outraged, to sell that toothpaste in a commercial break, which is really the goal. But at some point, I just like going over and listening to, if I can listen to MSNBC and Fox News, then I feel like I'm really getting a full taste of what both extremes, both of which are completely biased and have their own agendas.
Yeah.
If I listen to both extremes and both biases, then I can synthesize something in the middle that's really what I believe.
Okay.
Big fan of politics, but other hobbies. This question always stumps me, and I'm not sure why. I just don't do a whole lot of things that I don't somehow exploit for my own.
Right.
Like, even the politics thing, my first few videos on YouTube were political.
Right.
So you're aware of most of my hobbies already.
And one more question from my roommate here, and I've wondered this for a while, and especially because, here in Texas, where summer's like 6 months out of the year anyway. Why do you perform in suits and tuxedos? Especially when you're here in late May, June, and...
It's a couple things. Sometimes it's literally the fact that a suit is slimming. Because my weight fluctuates throughout the year, and I'm always wanting to look like I did when the first videos came out. But that was 4 years ago, and a lot of guys in their 20s, late 20s, are not quite where they were 4 years before. So the real truth is a lot of times wearing a suit is just a matter of, well, this will make my shoulders look bigger, which will make more of a V, and there won't be that much of that pouch down there. But other times, it's just the fact that, it's fun. There's something about wearing a suit. I never really wore suits until, or at least appreciated wearing a suit until maybe when I started going to prom in high school. And I was a prom date of a girl, my sophomore year, but it was her senior year, same deal with junior and senior. And at some point you start to walk different. You kind of embody the suit in a certain way. And so in a way it's almost like doing mask work in theater, which is where once you put on the mask, you can take on a different character, and it's not so much you as the character.
Right.
Well, Brentalfloss is me, but it's kind of like Mr. Hyde if I'm Dr. Jekyll. It's like a sort of a mutation of me. Now see, that just said movie recording has been stopped automatically.
Oh, it's Magic Lantern. It does that. Because 12-minute limit, it actually restarts it.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, I was just so afraid that it was like we cut off a long time ago. Okay, yeah, there's something about a suit that is so much. I mean, yeah, some people like to look cool and they're like t-shirt and jeans or whatever they like to wear for their show. But for me, there's something about it that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek and a little bit polished at the same time.
Right.
And it's just kind of my look.
You just kind of, it's almost like that's your superhero suit. You just
Exactly.
I'm now Brentalfloss. I'm here to perform. So, what do you see in your future? What are your plans?
Money and happiness. In real life, I see basically an expansion of what I do, or if maybe not an expansion, but a return. Because the thing is, in 2008, I had 3 paths. I could teach the arts, and I was doing that.
Yeah.
I could write musicals, and I was doing that. Or I could be a video game-based internet thing, which I was doing. And it turned out that this one, Brentalfloss, won out. But that doesn't mean I still don't love these other 2.
Right.
So the future, I hope, will hold a good balance of the other things I want to do. Because as much fun as the Brentalfloss thing is, I'm not sure I want to add lyrics to video game tunes till I'm dead.
Right.
Or at least not exclusively. Because there's so much other stuff I'd like to do and want to try. And if I fall on my face and it turns out the only thing I'm really good at is video game lyrics, cool. But I want to try it first.
Right. Like one thing you mentioned, like you're always writing plays and musicals.
Yeah. And that's gone away a little bit in the last few years as I've focused more on, taking that creative energy and making it more about videos. But I want to get into that. I'm slowly working on a new show, and I want to eventually just do a lot more live theater stuff. You take somebody like, what's his name? Brett McKenzie, the Flight of the Conchords.
Okay.
Who just, was doing comedy music, and then that turned into a live show, that turned into a TV show, and then he wrote the music for the Muppet movie, and that became an Oscar-winning song.
Yeah.
So he went from musical comedian to Oscar-winning composer in a fairly short amount of time, because he kept doing good work and he kept expanding what he was able to do. And I mean, that wasn't just him, obviously there was a team, blah, blah, blah. But that's kind of a model, that or like Steve Martin,
right,
who did stand-up, got sick of it, did movies, got sick of them, still does them occasionally, wrote a play, wrote a book, won awards.
Yeah, he's a musician.
Yeah, he has a band now. He did a kids album, I think, at one point. He just kind of does whatever he wants to do and goes with the flow. And that kind of life, even though you have a much more complicated Wikipedia page and it's hard for people to know what to associate you with, you have a much more artistically fulfilled life. And that's the kind of thing I'm looking forward to. I never want to get known for just one thing for too long, because if
you paint yourself into a corner, really.
Exactly, and I don't want to do that. And I feel like I've only got so much time to try other things before people are going to just go, oh, the lyrics guy and nothing else, So I'm trying to pretty soon start some other projects, but can't really be too specific at this point because it's all in the future. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm really looking forward to whatever you bring out in the future, and I'm definitely looking forward to the show on Sunday.
Thank you.
And you're also going to be at ACON next weekend.
Yes, in Dallas, ACON. It's going to be, I forget where the hotel is, but a-con.com, whatever.
Yeah.
But we have a show, same band, Brentalfloss and the Cartridge Family, Saturday night at 10:30 at Acon.
And you're kind of all over the place this summer, I've noticed.
Oh man, yeah. Well, because with the new CD, it's kind of like a book tour.
Yeah.
You wanna just because you've got fans that are buying it doesn't mean everyone's bought it. So it's like it's a really good time to get out there, do some shows, spread the goodness around, and also, frankly, make some money because the more of that I have, the more I can put it back into the business. For instance, I just started doing a new animated video that I'm paying a pretty good amount of money for, but it's going to be the kind of thing that raises the bar forever on
Nice.
on my my video quality. So it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I am. Where am I not this summer? Baltimore, Orlando, Toronto, Philly, I think, Connecticut. The list goes on. It's mostly the eastern half of the United States, but there's a lot of stops. So, and Brentalfloss.com/show dates is the place to go.
Let's say definitely go check out the website Brentalfloss.com. You got the comic, you got the tour stuff. You can buy his new album Bits of Me from the website, which I'm very much looking forward to. So I'd like to give a big shout out to Game Over Video Games, the best retro game store in all of Texas, for allowing us to come in and take up their museum space.
Thank you very much, seriously.
Have this discussion, and I would very much like to thank you for taking time out of your morning
It was my pleasure, man.
to
Thanks.
come talk to us. So Brentalfloss.com, make sure to go check them out. I'm Rob, and you're watching Spankwagon, only Spankwagon.net.